Every time a Doner Kebab spins behind the counter, there's a whole factory story behind it that most people never get to see. These kebabs aren't just cooked, they're engineered with precision. And once you see how it all comes together, the way you look at Doner will never be the same. So what really happens inside those giant food factories before your kebab hits the grill? Well, let's dive right into it here at the Process World. The journey of a Doner Kebab doesn't just start at the grill, it actually begins at the farm. Before anything touches a skewer, factories work closely with trusted meat suppliers who know exactly what to deliver. Once the right meat is sourced, it's packed into temperature-controlled trucks and sent straight to the factory. And this step is seriously strict. The cold chain has to be perfect. If the meat gets too warm during the trip, it can spoil or grow harmful bacteria. So from the moment it leaves the farm, it's kept chilled the whole way through. Once the frozen meat reaches the factory, the first job is to get it ready for seasoning. And that starts with careful thawing. Factories don't just leave it out at room temperature. Instead, they use special chillers to bring the meat up to just the right temperature. Cold enough to stay safe, but soft enough to work with. After thawing, the meat is inspected and trimmed by workers wearing clean uniforms, gloves, and hairnets. Any unwanted parts, like thick fat layers or sinew, are removed. This trimming helps make sure that every slice of the kebab will cook evenly and have the right texture. The cleaner the cut, the better the end result. Once everything is prepped and sorted, it's ready to soak in the flavor. Because next up, it's marination time. This is where the marination process comes in. Factories use large mixing machines to coat the meat evenly with spices, herbs, and oils. The blend usually includes ingredients like garlic, paprika, cumin, oregano, black pepper, and sometimes yogurt or vinegar, depending on the recipe. These spices aren't just for taste, they also help soften the meat and give it that familiar Doner aroma. The meat is then loaded into big tumblers. These machines rotate slowly, turning the meat while creating a vacuum inside. This helps the marinade soak deep into every piece. The tumbling process can last anywhere from 30 minutes to a few hours, depending on how strong the flavor needs to be. Once the mixing is done, the meat isn't cooked right away. It's often stored in chilled rooms to rest. This holding time helps the flavors develop further and keeps everything fresh. At this point, the meat is well seasoned, tender, and ready to be built into those massive cones that spin in kebab shops. And building those cones is a whole process of its own. Workers begin stacking the slices onto a tall meat skewer, sometimes by hand, sometimes with the help of machines that guide the shape. Factories often mix thick cuts with thinner ones, and in some cases even spread minced meat between the layers to help everything bind together. The shape matters. It's wide at the top and tapers down at the bottom, designed to cook evenly on a vertical rotisserie. As the layers go up, they're pressed down with firm hands or even hydraulic presses to eliminate any air pockets. The tighter the cone, the better it holds up during cooking. Once it's shaped just right, it's weighed to meet exact portion sizes. No guesswork here. Then comes the deep freeze. Right after assembly, these meat towers are moved into powerful blast freezers that rapidly drop the temperature. This quick chill locks everything in place, keeps bacteria at bay, and firms up the structure so it doesn't collapse during transport. The cone's core must reach at least -18 degrees Celsius within a few hours to meet strict food safety standards. Once frozen solid, each cone is wrapped in protective food-grade film, labeled, boxed, and stored in icy warehouses. It sits there, frozen in time, waiting for its big moment. That moment comes when the cone is loaded into a vertical rotisserie. One side heats up, the other rotates slowly, cooking the meat in layers. As the outside crisps up, the workers shave off golden slices with long knives or electric blades, while the inner meat keeps cooking. It's a slow, satisfying process that ends with the perfect doner wrap landing in your hands. But before the doner leaves the factory floor, it has to pass through a few final checks. After passing all the checks, the doner meat is ready to be portioned. In many factories, this step is handled by high-speed slicing machines. These machines cut the meat into thin, even pieces, similar to how it's served at restaurants. Each slice moves onto a conveyor belt, where it moves along to the next stage. Once the portions are lined up, they're placed into trays or film sheets that are ready for sealing. The whole step moves fast, often with hundreds of packs made every hour. Workers nearby watch the line to keep everything running smoothly and step in if anything goes off track. This is where the Doner Kebab starts turning into a packaged product, clean, even, and sealed for freshness. And right after this, it's time to box it up and label everything before sending it out to the world. After being packed and labeled, the Doner boxes are stacked into large cartons and sent to cold storage. From here, they're ready for shipping. And now we dive into how a bunch of peas, soybeans, and oils turn into something that sizzles, smells, and even tastes like real meat. Yes, plant-based meat. From extracting pure protein out of plants, to molding it into burger patties and sealing it with those sleek packages, we break down how every step is carefully engineered to fool your taste buds. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Plant-based meats start with one crucial thing: protein. Not just any kind. Factories go for soy, peas, chickpeas, and wheat because they're protein-rich and don't have any strong flavors. That neutral taste makes it easier to create convincing meat-like flavors later on. Once the ingredients arrive, they're stored in climate-controlled rooms and tracked down to the exact field that they came from. But protein doesn't come ready to go. It has to be pulled out. That's where the extraction comes in. The plants are soaked, ground down, and spun through filters and centrifuges that isolate the protein. Everything else, fiber, starch, fats, get tossed aside. Some factories also throw in enzymes or heat to clean things up even more. What comes out is a fine beige powder that's shelf-stable and ready for the next phase. Inside the factory, massive industrial mixers blend the protein with other ingredients like plant oils, natural flavors, and binders. These mixers are powerful and designed to keep the texture consistent across every batch. The oils like coconut or sunflower help give the final product a juicy feel when cooked. At the same time, flavorings like yeast extract or spices are added to build up that meaty taste. Then there are binders, such as methyl cellulose or starch, which help hold everything together when it's being cooked or grilled later. Once the protein powder is ready, it's time to turn it into something that actually feels like meat. This is where the extrusion comes in, a fancy word for a clever bit of food engineering. The protein mix is pushed through a machine under high heat and pressure, stretching the proteins and aligning them into long layered strands. Basically, it's mimicking the muscle fibers that you find in real meat. As the mix exits the machine, it cools down fast and locks into a fibrous texture that bites like the real deal. But texture isn't enough. It needs proper shape. Shaping isn't just about appearance. It plays a big role in how the final product cooks and feels. Once they're shaped, the pieces are placed onto trays or conveyor belts, ready for the next step, pre-cooking. This step helps develop flavor, improve texture, and make the product safer to eat. Depending on the product, it might go through baking, steaming, or even light frying. The goal is to give it a cooked surface and lock in that meaty feel. Cooking also helps with moisture control. Too much moisture can ruin the texture, and too little can make it dry. By the end of this stage, the plant-based meats look ready to eat, and it's fully prepped for packaging. This step is all about protecting the final product and making sure that it stays fresh until it reaches the shelf. Factories use special packaging materials that block out air, moisture, and light. These barriers also help prevent spoilage and keep the flavor locked in. Each item is sealed tightly using heat sealing machines. Then it's labeled with all the important details. At this point, the plant-based meat is fully protected and ready for storage and shipping. But that's not as interesting as turning raw chunks of pork and beef into those spicy, smoky pepperoni slices that we all love on pizza. You want to know the steps? Let's dive right into it. Pepperoni's journey starts with meat, specifically a carefully chosen blend of pork and beef. Factories don't just toss in random cuts. They go for meat with just the right amount of fat content, typically aiming for around 44%. That's the sweet spot for achieving pepperoni's signature chewy, rich texture. Before any grinding begins, the meat is chilled or slightly frozen to around -6 degrees Celsius. This firm temperature keeps the fat solid, which is crucial for clean grinding. Once cooled, the meat goes through a coarse grind, leaving it chunky enough to soak up the flavors that come next. That's where the spice mix enters the scene. Paprika for smokiness and color, garlic for depth, plus a hint of cayenne, black pepper, and sometimes fennel or mustard seed for an extra kick. Curing salts like sodium nitrate are added too, not just for preservation but to lock in that bold red hue. Beneficial bacteria are also introduced to prep the meat for fermentation. laying the groundwork for pepperoni's tangy edge. Everything is then moved into massive paddle blenders, where the seasonings and cultures are gently mixed. The machines stay cold, between -3 and -1 degrees Celsius, to keep the fat firm and avoid overmixing, which could ruin the texture. Once everything is evenly combined, the mixture goes through a finer grind, down to about 2.5 millimeters. This final grind smooths everything out and preps the batch for stuffing. At this point, the meat texture is fully seasoned, well blended, and ready to be shaped into the sausages that will eventually turn into those tasty red slices. The mixture is loaded into high-speed stuffing machines that press it into long, fibrous casings. About 48 millimeters wide, which is the standard size for slicing into those familiar round pepperoni pieces. Once the sausages are filled, they're clipped or tied at regular lengths and neatly arranged for what's arguably the most important stage, fermentation. Right now they still look raw and pale, but everything's in place for a dramatic transformation. Inside the fermentation chamber, the temperature rises to around 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. Over the next 12 hours, the beneficial bacteria added earlier begin breaking down the sugars in the meat, producing lactic acid. This gradually lowers the pH, which does two things: protects the pepperoni from harmful bacteria and adds that signature tangy flavor. By the end of fermentation, the pH drops to about 5.1, hitting the perfect balance for safety and taste. After fermentation, the sausage is moved to the next stage. At this stage, the pepperoni isn't fully cooked like your typical meat, it's gently warmed. The sausages are placed in a room set to about 54 degrees Celsius, just enough to slowly raise their internal temperature to 52 degrees Celsius. This controlled heat firms up the meat, locks in the shape, and eliminates any lingering bacteria. It's all about precision, not sizzle. Once the target temp is hit, the sausages get a breather. Resting helps the heat spread evenly from the edge to the center, stabilizing the texture. Then comes a quick cold water shower, not for hygiene, but to cool the surface and get the sausages ready for drying. Drying is where the real transformation finishes. The sausages are hung in a cool, humid room around 14 degrees Celsius with 75% humidity. They hang for days, losing about 20% of their weight as moisture slowly evaporates. That slow drying is key. It firms up the texture, deepens the flavor, and creates a shelf-stable product that doesn't need refrigeration right away. Once the sausages hit that perfect dryness, they're ready for slicing, sealing, and shipping. The long sausages go through a high-speed slicing machine that turns them into even, thin circles, the kind you usually see on pizza. These machines are built for precision, making sure that every slice has the same thickness. Right after slicing, the pieces are laid out onto trays and packed into stacks, depending on how they'll be sold. Then they'll head to the vacuum sealing machines. These machines pull out the air and tightly seal the pack, helping the pepperoni stay fresh for a longer time. Some factories also use modified atmosphere packaging, which swaps the air inside with a safe mix of gases to preserve the flavor and texture even better. Before the packages leave the factory, they go through several quality checks. This includes checking for seals, inspecting the slices, and making sure that the labels are accurate. Once they pass all that, they're ready to be shipped out to stores, restaurants, and homes. Now that you've seen how Doner Kebabs, plant-based meat, and pepperoni are all carefully engineered behind the scenes, which one do you think will be around 100 years from now, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments section below.